Welcome. My name is Olga Chwa, and I welcome you to Monday Movement and Meditation. We'll have a moment of settling here, and we'll move into a practice with our joints.
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to support this channel.
So we begin with this awareness, this dropping in. Noticing where the body is here upon the earth, noticing where the support is, and noticing piece by piece which parts are supported, which parts are resting upon something, which parts are held like a puzzle. All these different pieces put together in this way for today's moment here, and that might shift, that might change. You might need to get more comfortable. And in just a moment, you'll be invited to begin with the movements of the toes. And before you do, take a moment to find the toes, just to bring the awareness fully into the feet, into the right foot and the left foot, noticing the right big toe, second toe, third, fourth, and fifth, and the left big toe, second toe, third, fourth, and fifth. And they might start to move. If they're folded, they might unfold. If they're somewhere where you're able to just fold the toes, the knuckles of the toes down and bring them back up. You might begin with those movements, little toe bending, upward and downward movements. Separating the big toe from the smaller toes, finding the space in the webbing. And bringing that movement into the ankles when you're ready. Continuing with the toes if that feels good, or letting the toes rest and moving into the ankles separately, feeling that, how it is in your body. And if you've noticed that one ankle might need a little special attention, if there's something that was maybe injured or maybe had a leg cramp at night, that's not uncommon, especially in these winter months, as we are a little more dehydrated than we tend to be in the summer. With the ankle forward and back movements, turn into rotations, turn into exploring what is possible in the 360 degrees of the joint's range of motion. Classical there. Diagnostic movement and therapeutic at the same time. The bonus of some of these practices is they help us understand where the body might be stuck, where there might be some tightnesses, some adhesions, maybe soft tissue that's connected to other parts after an injury, after an impact of any kind. And as the toes and ankles feel warmed up and alive, take a moment to notice what that feels like, feeling into the effects, finding that stillness again, that moment of rest and breath and checking in. And that shift just in the feet might inform other parts of the body, might give the shoulders a different permission, or let the jaw loosen up. Things are interconnected, so let the body sort itself out after those initial movements, giving yourself a few breaths before moving into the next. And the next invitation are the knees. You might separate them out. Again, you might do them both together. Both together is a lot more demanding for the core strength, so that's an option to make it stronger of a practice. If you're sitting, the invitation is to start with one leg and open and close. Just check out its range of motion. What's possible here? Up and down. And the knee is special that in the right angle, it can be part of internal and external rotation in collaboration with the hip. So it's the knee, but it's also the hip. You're feeling into that side to side range of motion, what's available, and then connecting all of that. The up and the down with the left and the right to a rotation. Keeping it as slow as you can bear it. If you like to coordinate with the breath, that's an inhale on the way up. From the low point up and down is the exhale. Changing the direction at least once, maybe multiple times. Resting as needed as you do. Possibly exploring more complicated movements like a figure 8, an infinity. letting the body's intuitive knowing as well as the sensations, right? Maybe even those first be the guide here, knowing that the little tugs and pulls that you feel are good information, and you might hang out in one area of these shapes, making smaller loops and exploring wiggles and squiggles, adding the ankles and the toes into the movements to get into the parts of your leg that feel like they need this attention. One at a time is fantastic, especially with the knee. I can't get enough of this about how that difference shows up and what you're able to experience in my body, all the way up the leg through the hip. I think I feel it all the way into my neck and ear on the one side. So if you haven't yet, switching sides with the same simplicity, opening and closing to begin with, what's available, what's there. Rotations with the support of the hip there, but exploring the possibility of the knee to then combine those movements. Find that roundabout. Clockwise and counterclockwise at your speed, at your pace, and the slower you go, right, the better the body's individual muscle fibers can be engaged, can be brought into the practice. One direction, another, and explorations of where this leg needs it, where these joints from the toes to the ankle might be asking for this attention. This joint movements into your body. To follow with comparison again. Hopefully they feel more similar. Hopefully you've come to an even experience. And if you didn't, you come back. You're thinking, oh, this ankle still needs a little more. Come give it that attention. Maybe some of those shapes that are more complicated than circles. Weaving back as needed for the legs. Continuing when you're ready with the hips. Sitting up, that movement can again be a lift and a lower, and then coming into a rotation. And in a more reclining position, letting the knee be that guide. And the option to do a rotation at the hip with a straight leg, a lot more work for the core, can be beneficial if that's a part of your ambition today, your intention to develop the core. A little lighter with the bent knee. Right leg and left leg in two directions. Just taking your time there with the hips. And we'll stay with the hips for a little bit. To keep serving the whole length of the legs, the knees, the ankles, the toes. If you're on a surface that feels steady enough to bring the feet to the floor and bring a knee to the opposite of ankle to the opposite knee into a figure four stretch. This is the invitation to get deeper into the knees, demonstrating here on the back, but can also be modified to sitting. In the figure four practice, the leg that is supporting, the leg that is bearing the lever there, can be moved and explored to a little to the inside, to the outside, helps fine tune the exactness there, with the figure 4 stretch, comparing for a moment, taking that breath to keep organizing, finding the comfort, finding the ease, one side and the other. And the variation of moving that stretch a little more into the iliotibial band in the same setup as the classic bringing the knees up and holding them. The variation of keeping the supporting foot on the floor and bringing the lifted leg over towards the ground in the direction across the body. So there's a bit of a twist in the hips, stretching the outer side of the upper leg there. That intensity can be modified with how small or large the angle is at the hip, bringing the knees up for more intensity, bringing them away to provide the softer. And the key here is to release through the floor side leg, the connection there of the ground, trusting the earth beneath, coming back to these puzzle pieces. Where is the body supported? Where is the body held? And what can be let go of? What can be undone? Adjusting the position to your comfort, meaning coming out and resting if needed, or making those angles wider, smaller, finding where the breath can go into the body, where the breath can support the ease. Finding this practice on both sides of the body and returning to anything from lower in the legs as needed, as you might discover that the knee or the ankle on one side or both sides are giving you some signals, some indication that they need that attention. Throughout the practice, small little shifts. Where can the hips go? Where can the knees go? Where can the ankles and the toes be even more comfortable? Is there a way to trust this earth a little more fully, a little more completely? And taking a moment to complete the set here with knees on the right, knees on the left. And then the inward and outward rotations. So at your speed, at your time, as you come out of some of those more twisty pretzely poses, letting both knees drop to one side. You've got options here too with intensity. You might have the feet further or closer apart, the knees closer or further from the arms. Discovering what works today for you. As you ease into these, ease into the conversation you're having, hopefully with the breath and the body, asking the joints, is this okay? How about this? Let's try that. And finding those sensations that feel beneficial, that feel helpful, ones that feel like openings and stretches and welcoming that space. Hopefully like you're welcoming the space here of a new year and a new month and a new moon. New right here. Yesterday we had a new moon in Capricorn. What a moment to get organized and sorted out as we take these few more breaths with the hips to the right, to the left, and then as you're moving in onward to outward rotation, so like a butterfly, feet towards each other, to the soles of the feet towards each other. And then more precise inward rotations. That might be one at a time. A lot of folks, especially as the hips are stiffer in the winter, we tend to be more tense, more bundled. Doing one at a time, and if you love it, bringing both knees in, being gentle, being cautious, right? Feeling into the knees, feeling into the ankles, adjusting that with the distance of the foot to the hip to create a softness, a looseness. And coming into a place of checking in, coming into a place of rest for several breaths. We'll move into a little upper body joint focus in a moment. There's no rush. There's a moment of enjoying and noticing. That might be on your back, lying down. That might be sitting up. That might be even standing, or whatever position is working for you today. As you welcome, keep welcoming all of yourself, all of these sensations, all of these experiences that the body offers, however you're feeling as you complete these movements with the hips. And bring the attention towards the upper extremities here, to the hands and wrists and elbows and shoulders, taking a moment to say hello to your arms. Maybe think back of a few things they've done today. Are there a few perhaps meals you've prepared with these hands? Perhaps there's been some communication these hands have done, some typing, some texting. Welcoming the hands. And whatever position you are in, you might be resting the hands on the elbows. If you're lying on your back, you might lift them in front of you. You might lift them up above you, out to the sides, wherever they feel good to you. And again, these might be strengthening practices. The holding and the lifting of the arms can really engage the musculature. So making those choices, if you want to make it more intense for yourself, or keeping it soft and gentle, if that is where your intentions are with your body today. And choosing, my wish for you is to choose the more gentle approaches, that you give yourself no more than that what feels truly good today. So the thumbs come inward and the fingers wrap around them, making fists and pumping those fists a little bit to help those fluids come out of the little cul-de-sacs that the fingers are. If the blood that runs through your body, that the heart pumps along, were like a set of roads and highways, and the fingers would be turnarounds, right? The blood would get to the end of the thumb and then to the index finger, middle finger, fourth finger, their little finger, and turn right around and come flowing back down and out. And so our pumping here helps support that down and out, moving just the fingers, just the knuckles, closing just the fingers, keeping the palms open, and seeing what else your hands might need today. One finger at a time might be a good stretch for between the fingers. And as we get into the wrists here, feel through the elbows and shoulders. Let them be part of the awareness. They are resting, they're not moving, but you know, you can feel them, you know where they are. And when you're ready, you fold and open the wrists. And I invite you today to try different orientations. The hands as if facing each other, they open and close, facing the floor and the wall opposite, facing the ceiling and the wall opposite. Try the different possibilities, facing the outside walls. And maybe with that different arm positions, if that's what your body is up for and enjoying. From the bends to rotations, and the same invitation is that you try them in different orientations through the arms. Palms facing up, rotating, palms facing out. In. to then discover more complicated movements, to then discover if there's a possibility of infinities, figure eights, in those different facings, in those different twists. And that might merit a rest for the wrist, a few breaths for the wrists. So you feel into that, and the elbows will be next, taking a moment to find what the straight arms feel like and what the bent arms feel like. And whatever orientations and directions, again, you're able to reach in to down, up above, but perhaps like diving in and folding different hand facings to get at different parts of the joints and the ligaments, opening and closing these arms in new ways, a way perhaps that you've never thought to open your arms, perhaps one arm in, one arm out, forward and back. Where else can you reach? And then coming into the squareness of a right angle for rotations from all those openings and closings, moving the elbows to a swirling, a stirring movement. See if you can let the fingers and the wrist just go along for the ride. The elbows were pinned and the hands were free. One direction and another, moving into infinities, figure eights. A little more difficult to change the orientations, but see what happens. Moving the palms to an outward facing or a downward facing. Lots of ways to move the joints in the body, making this your own practice and giving yourself rest before moving on to the shoulders, letting the muscles that we're working there take a breather, take a reset. You might adjust any parts below you or above you, any parts of the hips or legs, any parts of the neck or head. And if you're in a position where shrugging is available to you, giving yourself a few shrugs. Oh, the mystery of things. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm letting the fingertips come to the shoulders to bring the elbows forward and back, moving the shoulder joints in the process. This might be the movement that your body needs at this moment, and you might also expand it. You might also bring it into the length of the spine. If you're sitting up, a little sitting cat. And from these simple movements, these up and down movements, forward and back movements, moving into rotations, moving into the circles. I'm letting this be playful as well, letting this be something you're exploring, something you're discovering, what can happen here, what's even possible one at a time, together, the other direction. What are some other shapes that the elbows might be able to draw, engaging the shoulder in new and different parts of the joint capsule there, letting those tendons, those ligaments be moved. Figure eights, infinities. which come back down to stillness and rest. Onto the top of the neck, not a part of the spine, part of the axial skeleton, not the appendicular skeleton, as we've been working with joints from the limbs, and we're moving into the neck, the top of the spine here, those 7 bones at the very top, beginning with your slow motion nodding of a yes and a no. Noticing how the rest of the body is organized. Those top 7 bones of the spine are supported by the 12 of the thoracic spine and the 5 in the lumbar, the low back, all stacked upon the sacrum, which is nestled in the pelvis. And I imagine wherever you are, whether you're sitting or lying down, that pelvis is touching the ground somewhere, touching the surface beneath you, supporting, feeling into the hips and the tailbone as you move the neck forward and back. You might even hang out in one of the positions, a forward bend. And if you're in the forward bend for a few breaths, you might kind of look around as if you're swaying, oh, what's to the left, what's to the right, getting to the back sides of the neck. Swinging left, swinging right, as gently, as comfortable as that is. And from an upright position, from that tall position, letting the head move side to side, ear towards shoulder. And in that side bend, you might stop and hang out for a bit like you did in the forward bend, and also introduce some other explorations. Where else can there be a little looking up, looking down, a little yes inside of the side bend there, inside of the maybe. And whatever you offer one side of the body, give it also to the opposite. Slowing it down for the neck, letting the body be supported in its completeness. For the third movement of the neck, the twist from an upright position, turning to look behind you, like a slow motion no. Turning to look over the shoulder to the left, to the right. And in the same way, perhaps pausing in that twist or partway into that twist, somewhere where it's sustainable, where the breath is available. See what other movements are in there, what other explorations, reaching, folding and bending. Letting the neck guide any additional movements, any more places that it needs to reach, and maybe including the shoulders in those movements. What does it feel like to move the neck with a shrug, with the lifted shoulders, creating that slack in some of the musculature of the upper back there? What's it feel like to bring the arms into a different position? Those shoulders, either arms more behind. If you're sitting, they might reach behind. That will affect the neck. If you're lying down, they might be in a different orientation at your sides. Combination of neck and shoulder movements. As you complete these upper extremities plus neck, taking a moment to breathe into that, to feel what you've done, to feel what you've accomplished, maybe giving yourself some rest, and definitely saying some very nice things to yourself, saying some very kind things to the joints in your body. You have moved lymphatic fluid through your lymphatic ducts. You have helped your cardiovascular system and the circulatory system with the blood flow, and you have created more synovial fluid, more joint lubrication in all of the places where two bones meet and articulate and give you that possibility of movement. If you're the floor type and are good to be on your hands and knees, we're moving into a little bit of cat pose and floor work. So taking that on, and this can be modified for sitting if you choose to remain in an upright position. The invitation is there. The focus is the spine. So on the hands and knees, the floor provides that feedback of where these points are in space. Finding the movement through all the joints of the spine now. The tailbone and sacrum have teeny tiny movements. We don't have great control over them, but the low back, you can curve it inward, you can curve it outward. The middle of the back where the ribs are has limited movement, but some nonetheless. It can kind of flatten out in the back bend and round down in the forward bend, and the neck has lots of movement. We were just focused on the neck. We got it ready for this thing right here. Letting the neck be part of the cat. And as that classic cat warms you up and gives you what you need through the spine, let it get cat-like and self-guided as you give your joints the explorations they need, the reaches, the stretches. There might be something you've done in the past that you want to try again. See how it works for you today. How about a balance with opposite limbs that lift and reach? Strengthening poses, the balancing poses, but a stillness. That moment of winter as you come into the stillness, and yet you need this balance to navigate the icy sidewalks. The opposite limbs, the opposite arm and leg, lift and reach, and that's one way to strengthen your balance capacities. And the weight bearing is strengthening for the bones as well as the muscles. And an additional challenge, if you want to try something that defies gravity almost, is to lift the same side arm and leg. The hips will adjust to that, undoubtedly somewhat. And the challenge, the game, is to square those hips as the arms square through the shoulders. These are suggestions. Please let me remind you, do what you feel appropriate with your body and welcome in your body. I'm guiding through a systematic set to get all the different parts and pieces, but your body will guide you, letting you know what's a good idea, what things to back from, away from, when to rest, and when to wiggle around and squiggle around and find the different stretches that are organically there. As the arms move further away from the knees, those stretches tend to move into the upper body, into the shoulders, armpits, upper back. Feeling in through the weight bearing and all these possibilities and explorations. And as you find linear movements, back and forth movements, see what you can do in terms of round movements, rotations. If this cat were given a hula hoop and knew what to do with it, wouldn't that be a sight? And resting is needed at any moment, giving the body the permission, the absolute permission to surrender, to let go, to be with the breath, with the movement that is naturally there, that's arrived, this fresh, perhaps, movement. And we do the magic of changing cats into dogs in this practice. If you're on your hands and knees, you tuck in the toes, you lift the hips and the knees up into your inversion. And that might be a stopping point, a point to hang out, to enjoy, and that might be an up and a down, checking it out and resting from it, or it might be just a swing through. It might be a stop along the way to a standing position that feels better. This forward bend can be equally explored on different surfaces than just the floor, but for a bit of a more comfortable experience, perhaps not so inverted, less pressure on the head. And if you are on the floor, or if you're with a chair, or you're against the wall, however you're practicing your downward dog, let's go into the little loop in the feet, stepping onto the toes, lifting the heels, getting tall, tall, tall in the legs, and then bending the knees, letting the knees bend softly down and lengthening the tailbone towards the wall behind so that the belly comes closer to the thighs. Feel what that does in the hips, feel what that does in the spine. See if you can continue that lengthening and keeping that lengthening as you allow the heels to drop wherever they're dropping, to go as far down as they're able to reach. So that little toe loop on the downward dog, that's high on the toes, folded knees, and they're reaching tailbone back, belly to thighs. In my body, that gets at the underarms for me, latissimus, serratus. I'm feeling, I think, teres major and minor, noticing where you're feeling it. And you'll feel it wherever your body needs it. You'll feel it where you're tightest. So give yourself a few breaths there, a few moments. Arriving to a standing resting position as you feel complete with this one, coming out of the down into an up, into a humanoid shape of 2 feet on the ground, and the body well supported by those tiny surfaces down there. Hello, feet. You might even lean over and look at your feet. You might notice what that does. Lets your tailbone stick out a little bit, but don't stay there hunched over. Leave the legs where they are as you bring the shoulders up over the hips. Soft and buoyant in the knees, letting there be a sense of fluidity there. And connecting with the breath, with that support beneath you, and whatever you need to be at your most comfortable in this new position, bringing the hands together, flipping them over as they reach upward. Lifting onto the toes. If that feels available, if that feels welcome in your body, trying that on, keeping all those alignments, all that organization from the feet, hips, shoulders. At least 3 repetitions, maybe more if it feels good, challenging yourself to hold the balance as a strengthening engagement. Eyes focused for that in a single point. And from the up and down, preparing for side bends by stepping wider for a better support there. A wider stance gives us more stability in that side to side movement. You might begin with the arms low, At some point, the arms might come up or even reach. And notice how the weight distributes to the right and left side. And often it's a tendency of sort of leaning as if you're one of these like cartooning. I always think of these like the person gets getting taken out by the wind on a cartoon, just one leg. You might even try that, giving yourself a little balance in the side bend on the leg that you're moving into to the side. And you might also do the opposite. So leaning left and letting that other leg hold the weight. Seeing if that's possible, a little more cross diagonal. One leg is reaching the other one there. Balancing out those sides with the great big starfish to move into a standing twist at the speed of your choice, letting the spine be your boss here, telling you how quickly or slowly to move. And like you did with the neck twist, you might hang out in the twisted up position and see what else is there. Some shrugging, some moving of the shoulders, maybe the neck wants to do something different, maybe keeping the shoulders in the back as the head turns forward. And if you do that on one side, try it on the other. These were practices that came from a client of mine's physical therapy, that dividing the neck out of the twists, letting it do its own twist in the game to get the individual muscle fibers. As you're inviting this new movement, especially if you feel like something's been stuck in the shoulders and the neck, giving yourself some experimentation, some how else can I address that, and then your stillness, finding your moment of rest. Let's go into some of the other open-legged positions before we go forward and backward bend. So in your wide stance, you're going to pivot a little bit on both heels for a standing position. Let's begin today with just the hips. And I say just the hips, but I'm moving the arms and the shoulders, as the arms and the shoulders are part of the response in the movement of the hips. So standing in place, but moving the upper body like on perhaps cross-country skis. And if you'd like to make this into the event of bow and arrow, do a little unofficial triathlon here, or the winter one is not, it's a diathlon, skiing and shooting. With the choices from the hip movements as you discovered them in your warm-up and preparation there. And you might have stayed there in that swing to one side, to the other. When doing the bow and arrow, the eyes are focused and not moving. But in this more organic movement, this cross-country skiing dynamic activity, the gaze can shift around, looking left, looking right, letting the neck be along for the ride or be a different participant in the movements. And then coming into that focus if you're choosing to go into bow and arrow. Equalizing left and right, balancing left and right, checking in with the left and the right, and then arriving at the center, arriving back into the middle, bringing the feet towards each other together for a backward and forward bend. combination, however that begins for you, with the support of the hands or perhaps with the arms opening out, progressing towards lifted arms, which will be the most demanding on the body. So taking that slowly, taking that with grace and ease on yourself. Back bends, forward bends, same thing. They might be just like, oh, hey, today, looking down. And you might be into a full movement forward. Attempting with the arms behind as an invitation to keep adding or mixing the experience. If there's something the body's thinking, oh, I really get a better stretch if. And continuing to make it your own, continuing to find what it is that your body is needing at the moment in stillness, in rest, holding the pose of that's what feels welcome, making it dynamic if you need that cardiovascular moment, keeping it in check with dizziness and blood pressure issues, knowing yourself and guiding yourself with safety. To then calibrate, to then come into a stillness in whatever position in the feet. They can be wide open for the steadiness. They can be closer together. As we wind around to the balancing pose, finding your breath here for a moment, finding that connection to what you've done and how it feels. And if you have a favorite balance, if there's something you've been longing to play and explore and haven't gotten the satisfaction here in my offerings, please take this to make this yours and do your balance. I've got my classics for you, beginning with that right angle to a turnout. Make that into a tree, if that's your pleasure, or make that into a funky cactus if you like a little more complexity in the limbs. Coming through these various steps at your own pace, at your own speed. It could be that lifting of the leg is all you've got strength and energy for. Focusing the eyes in a single point somewhere low and checking that stacking, checking that lift. The tree pose by name gives us the metaphor of rootedness, connection to the earth. And that might be helpful in finding that balance if you're struggling to be steady on one leg, to give yourself that image of deep roots beneath the foot, or maybe even the body in the earth from the hips downward, if that's a pleasant image for you, if that feels helpful. At least 2 rounds, meaning at least twice on the right and twice on the left. However, whichever variation in your practice you're working on. And as you complete those practices, as you complete these moments of balance, keep checking in with all of you, welcoming and welcoming again the pieces and the parts that put together, make the puzzle that you are. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you twice a week in this year, Mondays and Wednesdays.
Thank you for watching. Please like the video and leave a comment about your experience. And while you're here, please subscribe to my channel and opt in for notifications to catch the next class I upload. And then head over to olgachwa.com to join in a live event or to work one-on-one with me. I'm here to help.